Hi, and welcome to part 2 of the 695-696 exam prep session here on MVA. My name's Chris Rhodes. I'm a Microsoft Certified Trainer and MVP.
And I'm Michael Bender, a certified person, a Microsoft Valuable Professional along with Chris. And yeah, we're here to talk more and take you on down the road and hopefully get you certified.
That's the plan. So we're here to fill in what we didn't tell you in part 1 to get you up to speed so that you feel comfortable and ready to take those 2 tests. So what we thought we'd do first of all is just give you a quick recap over some of the material we presented in part 1. And that's just really to remind you that we're delivering this as a package. We're covering both tests across these 2 sessions. We're not distinguishing in the slides here about which point is which exam, because we expect you to study both together. You should have that holistic knowledge before you take both the tests. Even though there's no overlap between the 2 tests, the level you should be at, the technologies that you should know really span both of them anyway. So make sure that you're keyed in with that when you're learning and when you're practicing on your test rigs. One thing just to note here, just to remind you, is that this is MCSE level. So what do we mean by that? MCSE level is that highest echelon in the certification family. And as such, you do need to recertify every 3 years. So don't think this is just going to be a one-time deal. You know, people are going to have to take tests every 3 years just to keep this refreshed, keep it up to date. And in this evolving world, that's no bad thing because technology is moving at such a fast pace. I'm actually, in a way, grateful. I don't like taking tests all the time, but you know, I'm grateful for that because it keeps me current, and that's what adds value in the workplace. So just a quick reminder also on the roadmap here. We're talking to the 2 tests on the right here, 695, 696. You should have already taken the qualifying prerequisite, which ideally is the 697 Windows 10 related exam, which is configuring Windows devices, or you could have taken the Windows 8.1 or MCSE 2012 as well before you got here. But now you're here, let's get you to the 695, 696 level to get you that MCSE Enterprise Devices and Apps qualification. And again, just a quick reminder, Michael, what do the folks need to know at home about technologies? What kind of tools and technologies do they need to know when they're approaching this test?
You know, quite frankly, you basically need to know everything that is on the screen here. You need to know the Windows 80K, and you also need to know Wake, Windows PE, MDT, Configuration Manager, DISM, which we're going to take a look at a little bit later. We'll show you how to dive into DISM and get some information on that. And all of the other things that you see here is that any of those things that we put on there for you are within the domain objectives. And you need to make sure that you get the hands-on experience with it. You can't just have the book experience. You need to have used the tools because the questions are often going to be worded and the certification's designed, not that you've read a book, but that you can actually do the work. So you make sure you spend the time with all the tools that are available there for you.
Yeah, and it's, as you say, it's not just conceptual knowledge here that's being tested. It's property sheets, it's, you know, configuration, the whole thing. So you've really got to know the tools inside and out. And you cannot just read a book. You cannot just watch one video. You've got to have the hands-on. If you don't have a test lab, go build one. If you don't have the compute power, use Azure to do that and build up some virtual machines in Azure. Play with that. There's absolutely no substitute. So let's have a quick reminder. Rather than go through the slides, let's take a look at the actual web pages in question here. We talked about this yesterday, but in the previous session, but we didn't show you this. So this is just a quick reminder that all the information you need for the 2 tests in question here can be found at microsoft.com/learning. And what we're doing here is we're trying to address the sections here called skills measured, okay? So we're trying to walk you through some of these areas, trying to give you the heads up, but you need to spend time in these areas. As we expand these, it gives you quite a lot of detail about what you're expected to know. Okay, so that's both for the 695 and the 696. Make sure that you're going through that and you're checking off every single area under each of the objective areas. So as we said previously, the breakdowns are approximately even on each of the tests. So here it's 12-15% on each of these areas. So you need to be studying equally across all of the exam objective domain areas. So why don't we drill down, go in a bit further, and give the folks a bit more insight into what they need to know in some of these areas. And we're going to also be doing a lot of questions with you guys to give you some heads up on what to expect and the kinds of things that might come up.
So the first thing we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at user state migration. So if we take a look at the slide here, it breaks out for us a number of the different areas within the domain objective for user state migration. So looking how we determine which user and data settings that we want to preserve. So you need to know what you want to bring forward, whether to choose a hard link versus using remote storage, how to make a migration plan for those applications that you're not migrating, choosing wipe and load migration versus a side-by-side, how to estimate your migration storage side, securing that data, because it's very important because you're moving important data, so security on that's a big thing. And you need to make sure that you know how to create a user state migration package. So let's take a look at a question. So in our question, you plan to migrate data and preferences from Windows 7 to Windows 8.1. Which tool would you use to configure which user files, OS settings, and application settings to migrate? So we have a number of options here. We've got the Windows Easy Transfer, or WET, the File and Settings Transfer, we've got the Windows Automated Installation Kit, and we've got the User State Migration Tool. So before we look at the answer, if you remember from part 1, we talked a lot about looking at the answers and determining the best answer for the question, and also getting rid of answers so that it makes it easier for you to get to that answer if you don't know it right away. So if we take a look at the answers, you'll see that we can get rid of some things here. So C, the Windows Automated Installation Kit, if you're familiar with this, this is basically the tool we use for creating unattend files. So it doesn't necessarily fit for the best answer for this. So USMT is going to be the best one for this answer. While WET and FAST are tools for migrating data, I believe, but don't quote me, Chris,
yeah,
both of those are pretty much in the close to being deprecated, right?
Right. In 10, we don't even have that at all. So, I mean, the question here is 7 to 8.1, so they'd be kind of in scope. But if we were certainly discussing Windows 10 here, a different set of answers altogether. So why is this the best answer here? I mean, could we get it done in Windows Easy Transfer? Possibly. But I think we're thinking here, let's assume perhaps we should have a caveat in the question here to say we're doing it for 100 machines. We're doing it for our whole workplace. We're doing a bulk migration here of all of our machines on our network. Are we going to do it through the GUI? No. We're going to use automation for sure. Yeah. So perhaps we should have put automation in the question there. But that USMT is going to be the tool you want to use, so you can automate that. You can put it out through a logon script or a package in Configuration Manager, MDT. That's the tool that people reach for when they're doing this for more than one machine.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the next section we're going to quickly look at here is create and manage answer files. So as part of a deployment, one of the things you're definitely going to want to know how to do is to automate your installations. If you're rolling out again to 100 or 1,000 machines, you're not going to walk around with an ISO or a DVD to get that done. You're going to want to automate that. Now, let's not spend time thinking about exactly how we're going to deliver that. It could be Configuration Manager, it could be WDS. That's not what we're addressing in this particular section, but those are definitely areas you need to know for the tests. Here, this section is looking at answer files. How would you create them? What tools would you use? What are some of the main areas and some of the most likely settings that you would configure? Okay, so we're not expecting you to say, right, I can write an XML file from scratch. I know all of the sections within that. I know all the parameters and all the possible values that might exist there. That's not really, that's too tough to measure on a test. But we need to know how to produce answer files, when to use them, exactly how to incorporate them as part of our build process when we're doing a deployment. Okay, so should we have a look at a question?
Yeah, let's take a look at this question. So the question we have here, you've been asked to set up an automated, hands-free installation of Windows 8.1, and you're given a retail DVD with the source files. Which tool is going to be the most helpful for this task? So we have the Windows Assessment Console from the Windows Assessment Toolkit, the Windows System Image Manager, DISM, Deployment, Imaging, Servicing, and Management, and then we have Windows Deployment Services. So the answer for this one is Windows System Image Manager, or WSIM as we like to call it. And this is one of those where when you're thinking about these questions, you really have to think, okay, what am I actually doing? So what I'm looking to do here is do the full automated thing and get to that point. WDS can deploy an image with an unattend file, but it doesn't allow you to create that. So we're going to throw that out. DISM is used for servicing and working with images. So DISM would be for adding updates into it, adding features, working with our images, and then that would work part of WDS. So in this, WSIM is going to be the tool because WSIM is the one that you're going to use to really create your unattend files from the source images. You'll bring the source image into WSIM, and then you'll create your auto unattend from that.
Yeah, exactly. And WDS would possibly be used in conjunction with an answer file. You could join the two together, but that's not going to be the tool to author the answer file.
Absolutely.
You might use it with a retail DVD, you might use it with WDS, but you have to actually make the file in the first place. So WSIM every time. Okay, so our next area here is looking back at Configuration Manager once again. We talked a lot about that in part 1. And again, we're looking at integration. We need to know both Configuration Manager and how that works. We need to know WSUS, WDS, MDT, all those constituent technologies. You need to know those in their own silos, but in this case, we also need to know how to join those together. So we're looking specifically here about how do we deploy software updates? How do we push out updates to Windows and possibly also third-party applications as well, using Configuration Manager, using tools like Software Update Publisher to actually get that done. So what do we need to know about the process of doing that? You need to know about how to build out computer groups. You need to know about reporting on that. You need to know about how we can build out automatic deployment rules to push that out, because the whole goal of Configuration Manager is that you want to be able to centrally control that and not have to walk around to every single machine. So building in automation to that is very key. If you've never built an automatic deployment rule, you should practice that. You should have a look at how we do that inside of the Configuration Manager tool set. So let's take a look at a question that relates to this area as well. So the question is, to configure a software update point in Configuration Manager, what prerequisites do you need? Okay, so we intend to push out software updates using Config Manager. What do we need to do first to get that done? So in this case, we're looking at several, to give you a clue here, we're looking at several answers. Which of these do we need installing to get this done? So let's take a look at the answers here. The Windows Software Update Services console is needed. The integration comes as part of that installation of the console. You've got to tie the two tools together so they recognize one another. To actually push out software updates, you will need a management point. You're going to need that as part of Configuration Manager all up. But specifically for deploying software updates, you also need a distribution point. That's where the files are staged and copied from on the client machines. You can't push anything out without a distribution point. That goes for software. Before you can get anything connected to the client's downloadable, you've got to have that software update point. Why is WDS not the right answer? We're not pushing out operating systems. Okay, Configuration Manager can do that. You do need to know that. But here we're pushing out software, not operating systems as a whole. So WDS is not in scope here. MDT. Well, MDT would be great, again, for pushing out an operating system with apps, but we're just pushing out software updates. We're not pushing out the whole bigger picture there. So Intune connector, not relevant. You can connect Intune with Configuration Manager. So you've got management of clients that are on-prem and cloud-based, but again, not in scope here. Okay. So the right answer is WSUS, management point and distribution point.
So let's take a look at another question. So to secure a software update point in Configuration Manager, which tool would you use? So we have WSUS, we have the Configuration Manager console, administration workspace, servers and site system roles. We've got the WDS util, and then we have WSUS util. So for this one, we would use WSUS util.exe, which is a command line tool. And for this, you're configuring SSL to secure that. So if we take a look at our demo here, you'll see that I'm at my command prompt, and I've gone down into program files / update services / tools to get to wsusutil.exe. So if I just start with that and add in help, you'll see that what it's going to bring back for me is all of the available areas that I can work with. So we see check health, we've got configure SSL. So if I need to know more information about, say, configure SSL, I can type that in. And you'll see it'll bring back information on how we use that. So this is a really important skill, not only for just wsusutil.exe, it is an important skill for every executable commandlet, whether you're in PowerShell or in command.exe, is to know how to find help and find help in the box. One of the things I tell my students all the time is that the real world is open book, and if it's 2:30 in the morning and you're on your server and you don't have internet, you still have to figure out how to fix problems. And Microsoft does a really good job over the last few years of providing you a lot of in-the-box help. So make sure you understand how to use that, because that's also going to be really helpful for the exam as you're diving into these commands. Because as you know, Microsoft is all in on PowerShell. That's the number one thing that IT pros need to know these days. And so the exams are that way as well. So when you're coming across anything that relates to PowerShell that might have a PowerShell commandlet that goes with it, chances are you probably need to know that.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really good tip. I mean, from a learning point of view, I totally back you up on that. To be able to type a commandlet in PowerShell with the help prefix is brilliant. That's how I learn how things work. You know, all the time we're getting new commandlets, we're getting new PowerShell modules. How do you keep on top of that? Okay, there's no substitute. You've got to sit there and you've got to do some reading, but it is in box. So you don't need to go out and research it. You can look it up on the web if you've got access, but like you say, sometimes you're in a data center, you don't have the opportunity to do that. You need it locally. So you've got to know how to run that stuff locally, whether it's command / or help space command, or in the case of yours, command help. So that's a great way to learn how these things work and get some more depth to your understanding of the technologies as well. Okay, so let's look at our next section. Here we're looking at planning and implementing software updates. One of the things that you can do nowadays with Configuration Manager is not only push out software, which is great in itself, but you can also push out updates to your software. You can push out updates to your operating systems, but not just for first party, but also for third party updates as well. So we need to know how to integrate that into Configuration Manager. There are tools that help you do that. Perhaps you haven't tried those out, but we strongly recommend that you play with those. So what we're going to do here is have a look at how that works through this question. You want to deploy third-party software updates in your enterprise. Your updates require no user interaction. Which tools or features could you use? Okay, so using your principle, Michael, of the sort of 50-50 rule here, I'm thinking, okay, there's a couple of potential options here that I could get rid of. One of those, for me, let's take a look at the answers here, is Windows Update. Windows Update is that internet-based service. We're not connecting people to the internet here. We're using Configuration Manager. We want to make sure that we're controlling the updates that come out. So Intune Software Publisher is one way to get that done if you've got cloud-based clients, or SCUP 2011, the Software Update Publisher for Configuration Manager, is a great way to get that done if you've got on-premises-based clients. Automatic approval rules, that's related to WSUS. You can create automatic approval rules in WSUS, but that's not going to help you so much with the third-party updates. Okay, people would probably have most experience using WSUS for the first-party updates, but here the question is about those third parties. Updates coming from other publishers, other software providers. We can integrate those. There are tools that do that. In my experience, a lot of people have never touched the two right answers here. Check them out, download them, and have a play.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about maintaining images. So you really need to know how to use DISM. So that's the main tool that we use for updating images. You need to be able to apply updates, drivers, settings, files to these online and offline images. Being able to put a service pack into an image so that you don't have to go through the old school process of, I remember the days where you had to basically set up a reference machine and you had to put all of your updates in, and that took a very long time. Then comes tools like DISM that really allow us to be able to service that image. You simply mount the image, you add in what you need, and then you go to town. And then you can use that to be able to deploy out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to show you a little tour of DISM and give you an idea of what the things are that are available in it. So if we take a look at my demo here, notice I have got an administrative Windows PowerShell prompt open. I'm just going to tell you one reason why I'm using PowerShell as opposed to command.exe. I teach all my students to use the PowerShell console whenever possible. For the most part, most things that run in the command prompt will run in PowerShell. So I like to get them used to using that. So let's take a look at dism.exe. So if I want to see what's available in dism.exe, I can do a /? with that. And notice what I'm doing here is I'm piping it into more because that makes it easier to be able to view everything. So as we go down here, we start to see our generic imaging commands, so how we commit images, unmount them, mount them, our WIM commands, how we work with our Windows imaging files, all different type of commands, and you get a description with those so we can see how to use those. So let's take a look at a command that we would use to find out the information on a file. So we're using dism.exe, and we're doing a /get-wim-info to find out information about the WIM file. Then we put the path, and notice that we're going to sources/install.wim. So in this case, I have Windows 8.1 Enterprise mounted here to my F drive, and I'm going to sources. That might be what you're doing, or you may have these images or the source files located on a network share, or you might have them locally. So if we take a look at the results from there, there we go. We see that provides us information about that image file. And what's really important here is when you're dealing with the client operating systems, you're often only going to have one copy of the operating system, one version of it inside. Whereas when you're dealing with things like Windows Server 2012 R2 or 2016 when it comes out, you'll often have 4 versions of that for all of the different ones. And those will be listed here, and you'll see this index number. That's very important because that is what's used often to identify those when you're using different commands to be able to service an image, because with DISM, you can service a single one of those files inside the image file. So you think about it, with what we're doing with DISM is it allows us to mount it as if it's a file system, and we can simply go in there and go, okay, that one version of server, index 2, I want to add features to it. I want to apply some updates to it, and then I want to basically commit those, and now I want to use that one. I've changed that one image, but the other 4 that are inside that file, or the other 3, they're perfectly fine. So, great tool. So let's go back to our demo real quick, because I wanted to show you something quick in PowerShell as well. So, being a big fan of PowerShell and being a big fan of getting information in there, I like using the get-command commandlet, and in this case, I'm using the -module parameter, because commandlets and functions inside of PowerShell are put into modules. So in this case, I know that there's a module for DISM. So I'm going to simply run this, and I'm going to pipe it into more because I know there's a ton of commands. Notice, there we go. So it's going to give us all of the different commandlets that are available. So notice here we have a add-Windows image commandlet. So what I teach my students is that go broad sweep out wide, get a bunch of different commands, and then start diving into them. So let's go back to the demo real quick, and I'll show you. I like to use the help command, and then you put in the add Windows image, and that will provide you information about that command. It'll give you the syntax and a general description. And you'll notice down at the bottom, I can do a dash detailed, which will break out for you all of the parameters that are used with the commandlet. My favorite is using the dash examples.
Oh, yeah.
Because this allows you to cut to the chase. You can just go, you know what? I don't need to dive into all the parameters. I want to see how this works. So this is a great way to become immediately effective with PowerShell.
Yeah, and this is brilliant. I love this. I use this all the time. And the examples parameter there is just so useful for learning. You guys have a mountain of information you need to learn for these tests. You're already getting a feel for that. We're trying to give you those little shortcuts to help you get there quicker. You know, commandlet with examples, absolutely brilliant. I use that all the time when I'm trying to uncover a new tool, new commandlet of how does that work? And that's absolutely brilliant. Looking at the examples, they're spoiling us, aren't they? They're giving us all the answers right there.
They totally are. So let's take a look at a question. And we basically answered the question for you here. How can you update files inside your custom Windows PE boot image? So we've got install.wim, which are install images. The boot.wim is the boot images. And if we go to the answer, of course we know what the answer here. It's dism.exe. Notice we have PowerShell for DISM. This is kind of one of those that it's going to kind of throw it off because it's not referencing directly the PowerShell commandlets. Is normally whenever Microsoft says PowerShell for and a technology, what they're telling you is there is a console built in. So like with Exchange and some of the other tools, they have consoles that load in their modules. So that's kind of one of those that's going to kind of throw off because we showed you that there was stuff available for DISM in PowerShell. However, there's not really a console that's just for DISM. So here, going with our general, what's the best answer? Of course, it's DISM.
Yeah, you know, we have to say that some of these answers we've got here are not of the same caliber, I suppose it's fair to say, as a real test, but we're trying to teach you as we're going along here as well. You know, if there would not be an answer that just said PowerShell, because PowerShell would always be the correct answer, wouldn't it? Because what can't you do that way?
Absolutely.
Everything, right? DISM is on the money here. dism.exe, as Michael was saying, you've got to know how to work with both the offline images that Mike was describing, but also know that you can also use it for online images. You can service an online and installed Windows image as well. It doesn't have to just be in a WIM file, although you've absolutely got to know that. You've got to know how to build those WIMs, how to service those WIMs, how to keep them fresh. You know, the whole point to a WIM file is you're building it once and using it across a variety of different hardware platforms. Some of that hardware you may not have even bought into your organization yet. You may be getting computers shipped in next week that require new device drivers. You've got to know that you can service that and update that and put new drivers in to your existing images. And DISM is the tool for the job for that.
Awesome. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about configuring and managing activation. So you need to be familiar with KMS, Mac, and Active Directory-based activation. So you need to be able to know licensing, because licensing is pretty important, because if you don't license your stuff properly, you get into some trouble.
Right.
And then identify the appropriate activation tool in a scenario. So let's take a look at our question. So I'm going to ask this question, hey Chris, so which of these statements are true of an Active Directory-based activation? Is it a role service in Server 2012 and R2? You need a KMS host key to create the AD-based activation object. Can you use VMAT 3.0, ADSI edit, or SMLGR to configure the objects? If you install a Server 2012 KMS host key, you can activate both Server 2012 and Windows 8. And then last, if you install a Windows 8 KMS host key, you can only activate only Windows.
Okay, so I'm hoping that if you're watching this, that you're already nodding as you're going along here, because you should be kind of recognizing the fact that actually all of those are true statements, right? this is not you wouldn't get all the answers correct on an exam, really, but here we're trying to show you actually all of these are true. If you didn't know that, as Michael described them here, you need to go back and do some more work on this. All of those statements are actually completely true statements, and we're just trying to highlight to you these are things you need to know, right? Now, activation and licensing, I don't know about you, but it doesn't sound glamorous when we start using the word like licensing, but it is essential that you know how Windows gets activated in your organization. You might be in charge of making sure that when you deploy Windows out to all your computers in your enterprise, that they're all activated successfully and that you're legal, you're meeting all your licensing requirements. So where can we go to find out more about this? What I found, I'm going to share with you guys, is there's a whole big guide on this online. A lot of people don't know all of the ins and outs on licensing, or they might know, hey, I use KMS in my company only. I've never used Mac, I just use KMS to activate my machines. You've got to learn them all. So here's a really good resource online in the Windows 10 Tech Center on TechNet. You can go and read up on all these different areas. So if you've only got experience with KMS and you don't know how Mac works, or you don't know how AD activation works or what's required for that, you can read up on it. There's some really good information here just on TechNet. Okay, you can go read it through, and it also, really addresses that other point on the objective domain there, which is identifying the correct tool for the scenario in question. If you read this, you'll know all of that for sure. Okay, because it will tell you if you're a small company, you've got 10 machines, this is what you want to do. If you've got Active Directory and you've got 10,000 clients, you probably want to use Active Directory activation. But there are some nuances because you have to think about disconnected clients and things like that as well. But have a look at that guide and that'll help fill in the blanks.
And that leads us into our next question. So in our next question, we're going to take a look at which types of volume activation are currently available. So I'm just going to really skip to the chase to say you need to know all of these. You need to know about Active Directory-based activation. You need to know about key management services, multiple activation key, online and proxy activation. So you just simply need to know these. You need to know the difference between those, being able to activate using Active Directory and how that process works. You need to know that KMS involves setting up a KMS server in your organization to provide the activations of your operating systems. You need to know that Macs allow you to have a single or multiple keys that get applied to multiple systems. And you need to be able to understand how all of that works and keeping track of all of those as you go through. So next we're going to talk about assessing the computing environment. So this is where MAP, the Microsoft Assessment Planning Toolkit, comes in. So you really need to know how to configure and implement MAP in an environment. Being able to assess information with Configuration Manager reports, how to integrate MAP with System Center 2012 Configuration Manager, and then determining network load capacity. So notice here there's a theme that not only do you know these tools, need to know these tools standalone, you need to know them together with System Center Configuration Manager. And that's really important. So the next question we're going to go into, what discovery methods are available in the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit? So for this, if we take a look at the answer, we see that we can use the Active Directory services for this, or ADDS, or we can use network protocol. So you need to be able to understand how these discovery methods work and be able to work through those.
Yeah, MAP's a great tool, isn't it? Here we're looking at identifying the machines, getting a list of the machines. Can we go and just find them on the network, discover them from their IP addresses, or do we go to Active Directory and pull up the computers from there? And this is a starting point for a deployment. MAP is a great tool for working out what do I have? Frankly, a lot of organizations don't even know how many machines they have running Windows 7, how many run Windows 8.1. If I want to get to a new operating system, I need to first know what I have in place. I'm always surprised how many people don't even know about the existence of MAP. But here we're making sure that you guys know, like Michael said, not just that MAP can be used on its own, but you've got to know how to integrate that with Configuration Manager. So if you haven't picked up on the theme, the Configuration Manager is really important for these tests. You've got to know that skill set. Yeah. Okay. So again, one more thing here. Let's take a look at one more integration, MDT. We talked to this a little bit in part 1 as well. MDT is a fantastic tool, as you know, for building up those packages and so on. But again, we want to know that you can integrate that with Configuration Manager. We need to know that you can build out your task sequences for deploying Windows, for using USMT, but also that you guys can build your images that you're going to use to boot up with. Maybe you're doing light touch or probably zero touch if you're doing Configuration Manager. How do you build a boot image? Using MDT as the tool for helping you to do that. Okay, so the Configuration Manager console has that MDT functionality in it, but we need to know how to integrate those together and use them successfully.
So let's take a look at a question related to MDT. So where is a new custom boot image stored when you create it with the Create Boot Image using the MDT wizard? So the answer for this is the package source folder or the UNC path. Notice, and Chris and I were talking about this, is that answer B says a deployment share folder. This could be confusing if this were an exam question, because you might be thinking, I normally store all my information on a deployment shared folder.
Yeah.
So the thing you want to keep in mind is the source is going to be a UNC path. So it's always going to be a whack going to a share location, or it might be DFS, so you could be using a namespace with that, depending. But it's always going to be that UNC path. So keep that in mind when you're looking for that source for that. So we've covered a ton of information, Chris. We've covered a lot of things in 2 parts. And as we said when we opened this up, this is not you're not going to sit down and watch this and pass the exam. This is designed as a way for you to get an idea of what's in the exam, and hopefully we've provided you some really cool information like some of the PowerShell stuff and other things that are going to help you to be able to be successful as you begin your journey towards those certification exams. So let's just kind of quickly review some of the resources that we talked about before with you. So the first, we have the books from Microsoft Press. So we've got the 695 and the 696 books that are written directly to each of the exam objectives. So these are very searchable, they're fairly inexpensive, and they're a great way for you to start learning about those. Some people don't like books. Some people prefer to have somebody in person talking to them. So if you take a look, we've got a couple of Microsoft official courses that go to these. These are trained by some of the best people in the industry. So we've got 2695B and 2696B, both mapping to the specific certification exams. Like we said before, you can get these online or you can get them instructor-led. So next, let's take a look at some of the different MVA session or the Microsoft Virtual Academy. I'm a big fan of MVA because, quite frankly, I work with a lot of college students that, their money, they're pinching their pennies. So MVA is a great free resource that Microsoft has put out. So you notice here we've got a bunch of different things on Windows 8, Office 365, and these will get changed up, and we probably have content coming out there on Windows 10 as well. So don't worry about having to search for these. The PowerPoint that's going to come along with this video is going to have all of the hyperlinks for you. So let's just go past the next list, because the next list is about the same. And let's talk a little bit about exams. So Microsoft Exams, they offer a second shot that's available till January of 2016. So that gives you a little bit of time, depending on when this video comes out, to be able to sit that certification exam. And the second shot really gives you a second opportunity to do the do the certification exam. Sometimes we all have bad days and we sit an exam, and even though we're prepared, something happens and we don't quite do well. So a second shot is a great way to get that second opportunity. If you miss this window, there's a very good chance Microsoft Learning is going to have another promotion sometime in the near future. So keep out for that. The other nice thing that Microsoft has rolled out is online testing. I know Chris is a big fan of online testing. I haven't taken an online test yet, but it's a good opportunity for those people that perhaps you live someplace that's not close to a testing center. I know where I live, there's one testing center in the city. It's booked out for weeks. It's very difficult to get into. So online, I think I'm going to take that as an action item for myself, Chris. My next test, I'm going to take that online. I think my friends at MSL would be pretty happy about that.
I'm sure.
Stepping up to the plate on that. So
yeah, you know why I like that so much as well? Exams are stressful, aren't they? Even I lose count of how many I've done, but every time I walk into that exam room, my heart's beating, my stress levels are up, my adrenaline's going. Even though I've done it before, it's just stressful. You can't take that away. But being able to do that in the comfort of your own home or your own office, that takes some of that away. So you're immediately a little bit more comfortable when you sit down and do the test. So if you've got the opportunity to try that, I would thoroughly recommend it. The online testing's brilliant.
Awesome. So we covered a lot of great stuff for you today. And what I want to make sure that you take away is that hopefully you've gotten information that's going to help you to get prepared for the exam. And that's the key for it, is take the exam when you're ready. So use the tools we've taught you and build a huge area of knowledge in these. Because if you're knowledgeable about the product, it's going to do a couple things. One, it's going to allow you to be more successful in trying to get the certification. And two, you're probably going to be better at your job. And quite frankly, that's probably what's important, is being good at your job and being able to be successful at what you're doing. So again, my name's Michael Bender. Thank you very much for coming out and talking. And my partner in crime,
Chris Rhodes. Thank you very much for watching, guys.
Thank you.
Good luck with your tests.